I've had lots of scary things, lots of scary things. But I want to go back to why I think I'm still alive, and I'm going to use one word here that I think is very important that you must adopt, and that word is discipline. Every single time you're going to do something, whether you're getting ready to take off or whether you're getting ready to land, you must have this discipline. You know, you don't have to take off. You know, we could stop all the aviation accidents in Alaska, just don't fly. Not a problem. You know, it's like the people I couldn't talk to, they weren't here. But the same thing, you have to have the discipline. You know, at our place, in fact, I brought all my crew so they could see me make a fool of myself up here. They're all sitting back there. Hi, Darlene. You know, the thing we have is I teach by rote. They say, well, rote's not a good thing to learn. But if every time you're getting ready to land, you say, where's the wind, and think about it, that's a good thing, you know, but you got to think about it. If I say every time, what's the effect? So in other words, you start out with, where is the wind? And there's lots of little signs. Is that not correct? He talked about seeing how the wind split out there. And what am I trying to say here? In other words, when you figure out, and a lot of times you don't need a 4,000-foot mountain to have an effect on you. You know, the important thing, I believe, is if you can find a stream and you look at how that water is flowing around the rocks, then you will understand how the air is flowing through the mountains. You know, another important thing is to practice where you're going to, you know, learn what you're going to do. And I'll tell you a quick story about my learning to fly. And I've been sort of mad at flight schools ever since, and that's why mine's a little different. I always wanted to learn to fly. How many of you have that same feeling? I mean, like think little kids, you built model airplanes, you know, all this stuff. You really wanted to learn to fly. And so finally, December 26, 1963, and that is over 50 years ago now, I took my first airplane ride, Cessna introductory ride, 5,000-foot long runway, 200-foot wide, World War II airport, and I was excited, but it didn't feel right. A couple of months later, I was up in the mountains and found this little strip where the Seventh-day Adventist Church was teaching their missionary pilots. It was about 1,400 foot long and about 10 feet wide. And I decided to learn to fly there, even though I had to drive 50 miles, 100 miles round trip. Long story, short story, got my private license, Inglewood, California. Where's Dan at around here, Dan? Dan I met just a few months ago when a friend of mine and I was walking by the Inglewood airport. And I said, Dan, I got a deal for you. He's working on his private license. You come up to me for a summer. I learned this from Paul, by the way. I said, you work your tail off. Almost said a bad word, didn't I? Work your tail off, and you might be able to get to fly. Remember when you taught me that? You know, volunteer work. Don't pay him. So Dan is here to volunteer and maybe learn something. But back to the Angwin story. Got my private license, went back to Napa, California, wanted to rent the airplane. They took me up, flew me around, said, you're great. Where are you going? I said, I'm going up to Angwin. And you know what they said to me? Well, you can't go there. It's too dangerous. And I'm sitting there, I said, well, that's where I sold it, and that's where I learned to fly. Oh, well, then it's okay. So in other words, in this flight training situation, we're so in awe by our first instructor, we're so in awe, but start thinking about what you're going to be doing with the airplane. You know, back to discipline. So I've been fairly lucky, is why I've survived. And another thing that Bill emphasized when I talked to him, he said, just because you got in there a few minutes ago, and just because you got in there yesterday, doesn't mean you can get in there this time. And I wanted to add that. So the two things I've just said is the discipline, it's where you practice that counts, and again, think.